See, before the war, my parents were very proud people. They always talked about Japan, you know, and also about the samurais and stuff like that.
The bombing of Pearl Harbor and the entrance of the U.S. into the war, a lot of people saw that as a perfect opportunity to get rid of persons of Japanese ancestry.
Right after Pearl Harbor, everything just, you know, they were just real quiet. They kept it to themselves. They were afraid to talk about that. There had been so much friction between the United States and Japan, and the way Japan was so active going into China and doing all that, invasion and so forth, that I had a feeling that, they're just crazy enough to come down here. And that's what they did. At the nursery, my parents, they were all around the radio listening. They weren't saying very much. My mother was crying, my father was just disgusted. All that work that my parents did to that nursery and so forth, what's going to happen? A few days later, the police came down there and confiscated all the flashlights and cameras. They confiscated everything that they thought that we would use for signaling.
The Secret Service and the FBI had swept into the Japanese-American community and had arrested any community leader, any teacher, any civic organization head of any importance in that community.
I thought the exclusion order would be only for aliens, those that were born in Japan. I didn't think that the government would go as far as to include American citizens.
If you have the Western Defense Command who was in charge of our movement, if they come at you with a bayonet in your back and say you're going to move into a horse stall, you do.
The people that we thought were our friends, instead of helping us, they wanted to take things that they thought they could use themselves. That's because we couldn't take it with us. I went to San Francisco, first chance I had, and I talked to this doctor. I just told him that, I've been harassed so much being an Asian that I would like to look more Caucasian. And he says, well, let me see what I can do. So I decided, well, I'll take a chance on it. He just slit my eyes, I guess, and took some of the skin off or something on both of my eyes. And that was it. It didn't work out right anyway. My mother recognized me. She knew me right away. Even my girlfriend didn't say too much. I said, well, you look different anyway. I felt uncomfortable was when I happened to glance at a newspaper or a newsstand where somebody looking at it, and it says Jap this and Jap that, and all the bad things about the Japanese. I even refused to buy a paper because of that, That was it until the time that I got caught. And then one day my girlfriend wanted to meet me. I was waiting for her at the corner and she didn't show up. I ran out of cigarettes. So like a darn fool, I went across the street to the drugstore and someone recognized me, I assumed, because when I came back and I was standing there for another 5 minutes, then the police came. And they looked around and they looked at me and said, did you see any short Japanese person around here, Asian? I said, no. He looked at me and says, well, let me see your identification. By that time, the 2 MPs came in the military. And he says, we have to take you to the city hall. After I was arrested, I never did see my girlfriend again. So there must have been something going on in there, but I didn't know.
We tried to find a legal challenge to the internment, but of course, in order to do that, you have to have a test case. So we were on the lookout to find a case of that kind. It wasn't easy until I heard of Fred Korematsu's case. in the newspapers.
The judge said, since you violated the military order, the bail is $5,000. And to my surprise, Mr. Bessick took out his checkbook and wrote it out without hesitation and gave it to the clerk. And he says, come on, Fred. He grabbed all of me and we start walking out. You can hear our footsteps clunk, clunk, clunk toward the door, and we finally got to the door. We opened the door and I said, wow, the sun shining right in our face. And then I looked real good. There was 4 MPs standing there. And Mr. Bessick said, we paid the bail. He's a civilian. And they would start pulling out the guns. And Mr. Bessick looked at me and he said, Fred, you go ahead and go with them, and I'll keep in touch with you. When the MPs took me to a separate room, well, it was a horse stall, and it was way out on the other side of the racetrack. And they took me there in a pickup. But it was a big door for the let horses in. There's a gap about 12 inches down below. There's no floor, it's just dirt. So the wind was blowing through there, and there's cracks all around the walls. And there was a light bulb up there, one light bulb on the ceiling, and that was it. And I went there and I lied on the cot and I said, gee, jail was a lot better than this.
In 1942, an ordinary American took an extraordinary stand. Fred Korematsu boldly opposed the forced internment of Japanese Americans during World War II. After being convicted for failing to report for relocation, Mr. Korematsu took his case all the way to the Supreme Court. The High Court ruled against him. But 39 years later, he had his conviction overturned in federal court, empowering tens of thousands of Japanese Americans and giving him what he said he wanted most of all, the chance to feel like an American once again.
I am a teacher, and I brought my class with me, and as an impressionable group of young people, and you were being described by so many as an activist, is there something you'd like to leave with them, or some message that you'd like to have them take away with them?
Yes, I would. And to believe on the Constitution, and also anything that's within rights. If you think you're right, and go along with it, and to fight it, you know, to not to give in. Like I did. I knew, you know, hey, it's against the Constitution what they're doing, and you know, even though, you know, like in here, you know, like I said, hey, what we're doing here is wrong, and I don't hear anything about the rest of them. So maybe they're right, you know, and I'm wrong, but I'm going to find out. So stick to your guns.
In the long history of our country's constant search for justice, some names of ordinary citizens stand for millions of souls. Plessy, Brown, Parks. To that distinguished list, today we add the name of Fred Korematsu.